Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Now, before we get started with today's video, I want to talk to you real fast about some of the upcoming giveaways that we have. So we had the opportunity from Precision One Ammunition. They've sent us some ammo to test and take out to the range. So we're going to do some chrono videos and actually show how the ammo and give you the raw footage, show you how the ammo performs. And they've been a phenomenal ammo company to work with. So we're going to be doing a giveaway with them here coming up probably in, looks like in August. And the way to enter that video or that giveaway is going to be to either share the channel or share the video, something along those lines. And so I wanted to let you guys know that that is going to be coming up. Now, it's going to be a fairly decent sized giveaway. I'm going to do about 1,000 rounds of ammunition. I haven't fully dialed it in, but it'll be at least 1,000 rounds. Let me put it that way. I may do more. We'll just see how popular, how much the channel grows between now and then and make a determination, but it'll be at least 1,000 rounds 9mm ammo that we're going to do on a giveaway. So stick with us for that. If you guys want to join in on that, like I said, just share the channel, share the video, and that certainly helps us out. Now, what I wanted to talk about today was I actually want to talk about lights, and I want to talk about flashlight techniques. And so I finished up writing an article on flashlight techniques and how to use them and which ones are best and why to use them and that sort of thing. And so we're going to go into some of the details on that here in this video and just kind of start at the top, which ones I think are stupid, which ones you should train, and basically how to end your training with it. So do you want to focus on one technique, focus on two techniques? Should you learn them all? That sort of thing. So we'll discuss that here at the end of the video. All right, so the very first technique that we're going to do is we're going to actually go over guns clear. We're going to go over and do the FBI technique. And so if you guys know, the FBI technique basically shows, hey, hold the light up here, right, like this, and hold my gun out here so the light illuminates both the sights as well as my intended target. So I'm way up here like this, casting this out here, something like that, right? Okay, and so this was the original kind of FBI technique, right? That's what it's called. I don't know if the FBI still teaches this in the academy. I can tell you that I know of not one single respected shooter or tactical trainer that uses this method. It's a fairly foolish method and in my opinion should die a very fast, painful death. It just needs to go away. And here's why. So the proponents of this will say, well, we hold the light up here, right, so that nobody will shoot, or so that if somebody's shooting at us, they'll shoot at the light and not hit us. Okay. So the problem with that is that it assumes first off that theoretically they can shoot at the light. Okay. So I want you to take 1,000 or 500 lumen light, shine it at somebody's eyes in the dark, and see how well they can shoot back at you. See if they can shoot you with an airsoft gun. Just try that test out. Take an airsoft gun and try to shoot somebody shining a light at you. It's incredibly difficult to do because that light blinds them and they're stuck like this, not even really looking at it, kind of going like that thing right there. So it doesn't really work that well in practicality. Now, sure, if somebody was way far away, they might be shooting at the light, but the aspect of it is that we have to consider is what are the chances that they're going to miss? When we know about 27% of law enforcement miss their shots, right? These are the law enforcement. These are more trained. They might be less trained than a lot of you guys that are real active shooters, right? But they're less trained than, they're more trained than the general populace, than the criminals that are actually going to be shooting at you, that sort of thing. So law enforcement misses hits about 27% of their targets in engagements, which means that you've got about what, a 73% chance that they're going to miss. Where do most people miss? Well, 90%, 88 to 91, depending on what number you go by, of the world is right-handed. Those right-handed shooters have a large tendency of missing low and to the left, which puts that right into my dome, right? So instead of actually hitting the light, they're more likely to make a canoe rack in my head. So if we're going to use that argument, we have to consider the misses, and the miss is more likely to actually go into us. And so it's not really a great argument in and of itself, but it's really not a great argument when we consider that somebody can miss their shots, right? And that they're more likely to miss their shots than they are to hit them. So that's why I think it's a bad idea. The other thing is this is not an intuitive place to hold your light. It is not intuitive to draw my gun and hold my light like this, right, and to actually scan and search. This is something that takes a little bit of practice, and we have to understand where this fundamental came from in the first place. It actually came from them holding lanterns out in front of them, and I'm not sure if it was the FBI, but tritium wasn't even a thing back until, what, 1934, I think is when it was invented, or discovered, not invented, but discovered, and so tritium wasn't available to even offer night sights, so they had to be able to illuminate their sights. Anymore, that's not really the case, right? So they also didn't have even after lanterns, right, we didn't really have super bright lights. We had old incandescent lights. I remember being as a kid, and then in the 90s, right, you had your mag lights. Everybody had a mag light, and those lights, they provide less light than the light on the back of my cell phone. So it's not really a good option. It has very little arguments in favor of doing that method, and the arguments that are in favor of doing that method fail to make a full analysis of the method and fail to discover what it was actually intended for in the first place, and they don't allow for the opportunity for somebody to miss. They just think that, hey, if somebody's shooting at my light right here, they're going to hit it. It's just not reality. So that's why I think it's a bad technique. It also doesn't allow you a two-hand grip on your gun. So tracking targets and stuff with my pistol and actually fighting the recoil of my gun is a lot harder one-handed than it is two-handed. So ideally we try to go with two-handed techniques. Okay, moving on from that, we have old Jeff Cooper's neck index technique, right? Something like this right here. And I tend to have kind of a modified one. You'll see the temple index was kind of a thing for a while. I mean, granted, it was temple index with your pistol, but temple index up here. The reason that I find neck index to have some validity is, first off, it was Jeff Cooper that kind of came up with the concept of it, so we got to show our respects there. Certainly, far be it from me to argue with Jeff Cooper, but the simple fact is that this has the same downsides of the FBI technique, in that a low left miss puts it right into my chest, but the other issue is that I'm doing one hand support on that firearm. The reason that I think that it is worth training this technique is because if I'm searching a house and I don't, let's say, or searching any area, and I don't have my firearm drawn right, because I'm not assuming of a threat or anything there, then practicing here, right, with my light there, because this is a nice defensive posture. It gives me striking ability. It gives me that good defensive posture with my hands already up, ready to go. So having this flashlight here puts me in almost a defensive posture on itself. And then if we're talking about, hey, I need to be able to draw quick and get 2 shots on that, whatever it is that's charging after me, that has some validity. So I think that this is one that should be trained, right, where we actually practice here and draw. But I think that really the training on this should be revolved around not clearing a house with this technique, but searching, target, draw, fire, 2 shots as fast as I can, right? That's where I want to focus my training on this. So it has validity, but it doesn't have that much validity anymore with searching or clearing a house, okay? So then we move on to our really the kind of 3 common techniques, right? So Harries technique, we all know this one, right? Where we see this in all the old movies. This has been popular in every movie from the 80s. So anybody that's an action movie lover, you know this one. Now, there's different ways of doing this. The typical way is to put the back of your hands together and hold your gun out like this. It provides you some support, but not a ton. Certainly no recoil support, but it does provide you some tracking support in rotating that firearm. This is a good method for tail cap use flashlights. It doesn't work very well for flashlights that have a side control button. It is a very valid method because it's fairly intuitive. It takes very little training to get new shooters up and doing this method and actually controlling it well. So that's one reason that I think that Harries technique has some benefits because it does work well with tail cap mounted lights or tail cap controlled lights, and it works really well for newer shooters because it's just a very intuitive way to make that transition to shooting with lights. Now, you'll notice if you ever see me doing it, I tend to do it like this, actually, and almost divert back to a teacup saucer. That's because I have bad wrists. I've had some wrist injuries, and so because of that, I tend to go like this as opposed to getting that nice support grip how we're supposed to. But keep that in mind. At different schools, I've seen it taught different ways. I've seen methods where they teach it like this, but the general traditional accepted method is with the backs of your hands touching each other, just like that. And so that tends to be a fairly good. You can see I've got my arm, I've got good extension on my firing arm, and my light actually has decent control there as well. So those tend to be a common way of doing it because it's so intuitive and so easy to train. And I'll be honest with you, it tends to be what I naturally default to. If I'm doing a house clearing, I tend to immediately come up like this, and that seems to be, it's just a much more natural position for us to go in. It also, if we're searching and clearing right, and I need to get my weapon out, then all of a sudden it's an easy transition to come from a neck index or a defensive posture with my weapon and my light in front of me. Okay, so The next one that we have on the list is the Surefire technique. And the Surefire technique, right, so you'll hear this, it's the Surefire technique, it's the Rogers, it's the Masad Ayub technique, whatever. Those are all three really technically different techniques, but they kind of have the same fundamental, right? So basically the light traps itself here between your index and your middle finger, and we control the tail cap with the palm of our hand. You can, if you have a side control button, you can do it with your finger there. So actually I'll show you on my other light here. So side control button, we can do it with our finger, and we have reasonable control of it. The reason that this technique has a lot of popularity is because it allows me to have support hand control, right? So I actually am controlling that weapon as well. So you can see I've actually got a grip on that weapon, and I've got my light on there. So I can do both things at once. I can control the both a tail cap switch as well as a traditional side mount switch with that finger there. Now, Surefire, I'm sure other companies have built lights that they have a little ring. I'm sure you've seen that, to where you can grab it and pinch it, or they have add-on options for you to wrap around lights that you already own. And those are certainly good options. They work really well. They have one option that actually goes around your ring finger and actually holds the light so that it takes a little bit less. They even have one that mounts here like this, and it mounts underneath your ring finger, and so your support hand your support grip is more like this. Okay, so these are all variations of basically the same technique. It's the Surefire technique. Masad Ayub has his variation, as well as Bill Rogers has his variation of it. So there's a number of different variations of it that I've seen, but the general fundamental is that we're going to pinch the light between a finger and or between our fingers, and we're going to get a good, or as good as we can, good grip on the gun while having both control of the firearm and the flashlight in two hands. This is a great technique. It works really well. It's a really well fundamental technique because it works no matter which light you have. So if you're like me, you have some that are tail cap lights, some that have lights on the side like that, that have the switches on the side. You have both options there. And so it's a great fundamental technique with that in mind, because it works with a lot of different flashlights. And then finally, we have the Chapman technique. Now, the Chapman technique doesn't really work well with tail cap mounted controls. It works better with side mounted controls. And so the Chapman technique, we're going to hold our light kind of like a hammer or like a sword or something, right? And we're actually going to do the same thing as the Rogers Surefire Ayub technique, but now I've got control here with it. This actually gives me the best control of my firearm. I've got the best grip on my firearm that I can get with any of the techniques, right? So I have the best recoil control of that firearm, but it's a harder transition to make from here, from a defensive posture, into this position, right? So it's a much more difficult, kind of quick transition to make going to that. And it doesn't work well with tail cap mounted lights, because if I'm a tail cap mounted light, I have no control over, I basically have to leave the light on. So if I'm using a momentary off light, I have no way of activating that. So it does have its downside in that technique. Now, the technique that I use the most is the Chapman technique, because the light that I carry daily is a streamlight wedge, right? So it has a side control. I have great control of my firearm with that on. I have good control of my light, right? So I can turn it on and off as I need to. And the streamlight wedge, being a very thin light, works really well to marry up to the pistol and actually have good, reasonable control with this. So this is why I like that technique, is because of the light that I choose to carry daily. If I was really going to focus, and I was going to say, hey, I want to focus on one technique and have that technique work with most lights, I would end up picking probably the Surefire technique, because it tends to be the most universal. It works with the most amount of lights. You can do, like I said, you can do side mount switches, you can do rear mount tail cap switches, whichever way you want to do it, and it gives you reasonable control over the firearm, albeit not quite as good as the Chapman. I still got really good two-hand control on that firearm, and so that is a very viable option for you to focus on learning just that one. My general recommendation to people, and what I personally do, is I learn two that I do really well, right? So I do the Harries technique, and I can get into that very fast with a tail cap mounted light, or I have the Chapman technique, and again, I can get into it very fast and I have the most control. This is the one that I focus on now because of my daily carry light and because I like the support that I get from this. So now I have a tendency of buying daily carry lights that have side control options just for that reason, because then I can not only get good control of my firearm, but I have great control of my light as well. Whereas in a Surefire technique, yes, I have good control of that, but it's not quite as good. So you just saw there that I bumped it off. So if I have a momentary off light, I don't have quite as good a control of that, because I really have to kind of bear down on that pistol, or bear down on that light. And so the moment I start firing and I'm fighting recoil, then my light tends to come off. And so with momentary on and off switches and everything, it sounds good in theory, but when you start practicing with it, it's a little bit harder. So the two that I focus on is I focus on Harries and I focus on Chapman's techniques. Those seem to be the best with the modern lights that we have now. That's what I enjoy the most. There's nothing wrong with the Surefire technique. It has its benefits, and that is certainly, if that's your preference, that's a great one to work on and to consider using. I don't find much use for the FBI, right? So like I said, I think it's stupid. So I'm not a fan of the FBI technique. I think it needs to go away. I don't think you should ever train it. I don't think it has really any practical use. And I think if you're going to focus on a neck index, you should really be focusing on not clearing a house with it, not learning how to clear rooms with it, but rather holding the light here, searching, searching, searching. Okay, draw, fire, 2 shots, and let that be kind of the end of it. So that tends to be how I focus on my neck index. If I'm going to go out to the range, I'm going to practice low light stuff. My neck index stuff, I'm going to be right here, searching, searching, searching. Timer goes, right? Okay, draw and fire 2 shots in that target, or even doing a target transition drill one-handed, right? I might fire 2 shots here, 2 shots here. But if I'm doing anything like room clearing or working on force stuff, I'm going to a Chapman technique or Harries technique. And again, Harries technique, I didn't want to switch lights again, does not work that well with side-mounted lights, because it's hard to control it. I can control it off really easy with this light, but it's hard to turn that switch back on. And so that's why it's not a great option for side mount lights. Depending on the side mount light, you can learn to control it with your pinky, but it's just a little bit harder control. And again, do I really want to be messing with hard controls when it's 3 in the morning, I've got shit in my shorts, and your heart rate's pounding at about 250 beats per minute. So guys, I'm going to let y'all go with that. I really appreciate y'all watching. Make sure and like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. Please check us out on Instagram. Our Instagram, we've got a new social media managing company that's actually taking control of our Instagram and trying to get that to the next level. So that would really help us out if y'all head over there. Make sure and follow us on Instagram, so that way we can get those numbers boosted up a little bit. We'll catch y'all in the next one.